And listen, I have a lot of gratitude for my team. And the last thing I would do is turn them over to a bunch of dip, you know what, that don't really know a whole lot, but they gave me a big check and now I'm gone and who cares? Those are things you need to think about because they're real, right? I mean, you're still going to see these people at the grocery store.
This is the PMP Industry Insider Podcast.
Hello and welcome out to another episode of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast. We take a look at what is changing in the pest and lawn industries, and we take you to the front lines to those that are driving those changes. I'm Donnie Shelton, owner of Triangle Home Services, which has Triangle Pest and Triangle Lawn, which are my two favorite companies. And with me, as always, is the infamous, the notorious Mr. Dan Norden. Dan, would you like to say good morning, introduce our sponsors, talk about our peer groups like you always do, and then our topic and our guest.
Good morning, Dan Gordon, PCO bookkeepers and M&A specialists. We specialize in accounting, bookkeeping, tax work for the pest and lawn industry, as well as exit planning services, brokerage work, and whatnot. And those are my favorite companies. And let's talk about our sponsors. So if you're interested in marketing for the pest or lawn business, Coalmarch is one of our sponsors, and they are terrific at that. Whether you're looking to grow or prepare your business for sale, Coalmarch can help you get there. Learn more at coalmarch.com. And if you're looking for pest-specific insurance, providing insurance products tailor-made for the pest and lawn industries, that's PestSure. They understand the risks of the business and the coverage that fits your needs. And they are specific to our industry, and that is pestsure.com. And our newest sponsor, which I'm very excited about, is Voice for Pest, which is the pest management leader as well as the lawn management, right? So they integrate with all the CRMs, including Real Green. So that's pest and lawn, PestPack, Field Routes. They're the industry leader in designing and implementing unparalleled voice solutions for PCOs and lawn care people of any size from coast to coast. I would also tell you that they are really, and Donnie can talk about it, the whole AI thing. They're doing some pretty cool things, and we're going to have them on pretty soon to talk about that.
Well, we're going to be talking about it, right? Because we're getting ready to jump in head first with these guys. So, you know, we don't have people sponsor that we don't believe in or buy into. So, so it's going to be a journey, right? It's going to be fun.
So learn more at voiceforpest.com/podcast. They're tracking our results, so make sure that you go visit them. On let's stuff their analytics. That's voiceforpest.com/podcast. You can't put one on over on us. We know what that's all about.
I know what that's all going on there. That's
right.
Uh-huh.
And then peer groups. We have David Billingsley. Focused. I think we have like 65 people in our peer groups that since we started this. He's been doing a fantastic job. Actually, as we speak, they are doing a peer group meeting in Vegas. So that was pretty cool. And so let's talk about our topic for today. Our two favorite guests are right here with you. And this is about what is your long-term plan? And I don't want to make this about selling, but at the end of the day, everybody's going to have to either pass it on or exit it. So today we're going to talk about several ideas that you should consider before exiting. And that could be 10 years, 20 years down the road, right? Mm-hmm. And when we talk about exiting, it could mean an outright sale to a third party or a partial exit where the owner sells a big chunk of his business and then rolls equity with a financial partner, or passing the business on to future generations. Like, how do you make the business better? The reason we're doing this is to kind of preference the next several episodes, and I'm not sure if they're going to go sequentially, but we are going to have several guests who are going to provide some answers raised. Generational type businesses and whatnot.
Well, hang on. So I don't want to get too far into here, but there's a couple things that we're rolling here, and I want to just take a moment. So first thing is that for the folks that are listening, this is really going to be, this is not going to be a scripted conversation. I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and I'm going to talk a little bit through my philosophy as well. Not to say that I have it all figured out, because I don't, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about kind of my philosophy on this, because Dan is correct. At some point, you will exit, whether you will exit the business or exit life, but there is absolutely an exit in your path, right? If you're listening to this. Second thing is that going back to the peer groups, if you're not a member of a peer group and you're interested in accountability, or you're interested in learning more from peers, you're interested in getting better. We were just talking about this because right before the episode, if you're not plugged into Triangle's numbers, let me give you a little bit of insight, some insider knowledge, as we would like to say. I had an amazing year, big picture from a profit perspective, but kind of a crappy year in terms of growth. And I was telling Dan, we have a peer group meeting coming up. What is it? A couple weeks, 3 weeks?
Yeah, we'll be there. Mhm.
Yeah. And everyone's coming to Raleigh. So everyone's coming down to come see Donnie. And I am just I am, what's the word I'm looking for? Not looking forward to this meeting, because I know what I have to report. I'm going to have to get up in front of everyone and be like, I suck yet again in terms of growth.
So this is the type of personality. He's had record profits, the most profit he's ever made, and since he's been in business, but the growth wasn't there. And I get it, right? And we talk about that remember that the composite, or some people call it the rule of 23.
Yep.
And that's exactly, probably a different episode, but we can even talk about it in terms of getting your company ready. But that's, if your profits way up, but your growth isn't way up, well, then that's clear. It's clearly why it's happened.
You're still winning.
Yep. Yep.
It's just, my point here is about the peer groups is that if I were not a member of a peer group, I'd just be fat, dumb, and happy. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I would not feel that underlying, because I know I have a quote unquote a board to go back to and report my performance, and I am not looking forward to that meeting. But it's going to be some good pressure, though. I guess that's my point, right? I mean, that's the value that at least for me, and there's obviously ideas, and there's folks who are doing different things, and I love learning from them. But at the same time, I like having that bit of pressure, knowing that whatever I do, I'm going to have to come back and going to have to like debrief it, and good or bad. And I know there's going to be some folks in our group who's going to be freaking killing it. And I'm just going to be totally envious and frustrated with myself. But, as a result of that.
So nobody does a PowerPoint or designs a PowerPoint better than Donnie. So when he had one of his bad quarters or bad semi-annual meetings, he had a neat little video of literally a dumpster that was on fire, that was driving down the road,
floating down a river.
That's how he described it. Maybe you could put that up on that. So anyway, right. back to our story.
Back to our plan.
In the near future, we're going to have several guests that provide some of the answers raised today. And remember, whether you want to exit soon or it's not even on your radar, a prudent business person has to have a plan, right? They have to set out the objectives and work toward those objectives. And once you achieve those objectives, you can do whatever you want. You can proceed and reset, or you can say, okay, this is, it's time. So
can I make one quick
everybody
point?
Has to have a plan. Sure.
Yeah. And I think the point here is that this is not like someday, like you need to have a plan like now. For me personally, and Dan, you've actually seen this. So here's my philosophy, big picture. I know I'm going to exit. I plan on selling the business. I don't plan on keeping the business in the family. I mean, I could possibly change my perspective on that as I get older, but as of right now, there's no plans to do that. But so I have my biggest fear as an owner is that I'm on this, I'm building this business, and it's going up in value, and it's getting, it's doing what I want it to do. And then I hang on too long. And then I start writing it down. And then all this value that I built, because I can't seem to let go, or I don't have a good transition plan, or I've not thought it through, then I'm going to also ride out the value because I didn't sell at the right time. That's one concern. The second concern,
I mean, what I would tell you on that is, I mean, if the results start going down and tanking. But a pest control company or a lawn care company that's built right is not going to, the KPIs aren't going to go down. The market may go down, right? But the market goes up and it goes down,
Well, I think I don't know. I think you could absolutely hang on too long, and you can also not sell at maximum value if you hang on too long. That's my opinion. The second part is that what happens if I get whacked along the way? Meaning that, and I say Dan has seen this, I actually have a checklist at my attorney's office that walks everyone through what's to go down if Donnie gets whacked, right? Which, by the way, don't anyone get any ideas that's listening to this podcast. But my point is like, you know, I have a plan for how I want it to go down, and I have a plan for if something unexpected happens. And by the way, this is not, I'm not publishing this checklist because there's some very personal things on it. I'm just telling you, if you don't have this in place, it's very simple. For me, I wrote a checklist that's about 2 pages long of who's to do what. Dan, I think you pretty already know this. Dan's a part of that checklist, right? Some key people, because ultimately what I don't want to do is leave my family with this business and I'm not around. And to me, it's like, the sharks smell blood. And so here they come. Right. And then all of a sudden I've got something to deal with and they have something to deal with. And my family gets raked over the coals because I didn't take legitimately the 3 hours it takes to sit down and think through. These are the key people that need to be in charge. Here's what needs to go down. And then clearly put that. I mean, and listen, every year I do a meeting with the attorney and my wife, and we walk through that plan and we confirm, is this still the case? Is this still the case? So, and again, I hope that never happens. I hope that I sell and, have I just do everything I ever want to do and I die in my sleep at 100, right? That's what I want. But, assuming something in the midterm happens there, to me, I feel a real big responsibility as an owner and as a dad and as a husband or whatever, that I make sure that those that are closest to me, get the maximum value of this asset. And that's exactly what it is. So, Dan, you're all over the
That's
place there.
interesting. No, that's interesting. So I didn't want to make this about estate planning, but Carol and I, my wife and I, we moved to Florida, and Florida has some different estate rules than New Jersey. And we went to an attorney thinking that it would be a 3 hour deal. It's not a 3 hour deal. It's a whole deal, and I don't want to go into it, but you need to think about all of these things. What happens if you're on life support? All kinds of different things. And it's not just the money where it passes, but yeah, you could have this great business that could tank pretty quickly because nobody's around to run it. And I have a
Right.
story for you in a little while.
Yeah.
If something happens to you, my wife could not run my business.
Same.
Absolutely not.
Yep.
So
Yep.
but anyway, let's talk about what is your time horizon, right? And
Mhm.
so here's where I'm going to disclose the reason that I thought about doing this episode about this topic. So hopefully you've had some time to plan. And unfortunately, many business transitions take place following a health emergency or death of an owner. And so it's never too soon to begin planning. If you are the head person without a strong leadership team, your emergency plan probably should be well funded with life insurance to protect your family if you die and their supporters and their support disappears. But here's one that really made me think about doing this episode. So, as you know, we're in the brokerage business, and we signed up a company to sell his business. And a strong leader didn't develop all the leadership, but a really good company, not a bad company at all. And we signed him up about 2 months ago to get. He's feeding us the information so we can prepare him for sale and whatnot. And haven't we really never talked about what his plan was after the sale and whatnot. And we got the marketing document, they call it a SIM, and we sent it out and got NDAs from different buyers, and different buyers actually interviewed him because that's part of the process of selling your company and whatnot. And so we had some people who were interested, and I got a call about 2 weeks ago from his wife. The guy dropped dead the night before. That happened. She's freaked. She has no idea, what to do or how to run this thing. Um, you know, uh, her lawyer's telling her, be careful, there's sharks everywhere, and he's right.
Mhm.
We haven't had a relationship with him. I think that we're going to get through this, but hell, that is a scary proposition. This guy actually was at a point where he was ready to retire, looking to exit, and poof, it's over. So that's
Right.
that's probably the inspiration for this particular episode. But
So,
so
so
let's talk
if
about
you're
it.
not
Yeah.
depressed or upset, then
Yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah.
welcome. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, 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 yeah. No. So Donnie's company sucks. One of my clients died. What else can we talk about?
I don't know.
But
Let's talk about politics. No.
yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. Right. So one of the things that you need to consider is, and again, you exiting may not be on your radar, but it's the way you know that you're winning at the game of business is when you increase the value of your company, right? And so what is your company worth now and in the future? And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you're right. I mean, this is not if I'm like, early 30s, I'm probably not thinking about this, but ultimately you should be thinking about a number. And listen, I'm going to be completely transparent here. I've had five numbers, and each time I've gotten to them, I looked at it and said, I'm not done yet, and I'll keep going. Like, funny story, when I first started, I'm talking 2006. I said, man, I'm going to build a business. I'm going to make, I don't know, 100 grand a year. I'll be my own boss. And then maybe one day I'll sell for 600 grand. That was my initial, I
Right.
mean, it really was. But my point is like, if you're in your early 30s, I would certainly have a number that I'm driving towards. And really, it's not even a number. It's more like a lifestyle. Like this is, the older I get, the more I realize like I value time way more, way, way more than I did when I was younger. So I enjoy my freedom. But the other part of it is like, okay, so I've got this number picked out. This is the quote unquote point at which I'm going to consider to sell. And so there's that piece of it that, that Dan's going to get into. And we're going to talk about, how you build that value and how do you get to that number where you can actually sell at that. But the other part of it is it's like, you also need to have the stopgap that in case something doesn't go as planned, which gets back into the estate plan, and I'm not going to pull us back into that discussion. So you've got something to cover you for the unexpected, but you also have a number that you're driving towards because ultimately, if you don't have that direction, it gets super easy when someone reaches a number that they're comfortable to just sit back and not drive hard. And I mean, this is just being an owner. I mean, listen, there are numbers that I drive towards, not because if I hit that number, all of a sudden I'm going to be worthy or better or whatever. It's because I enjoy the game. And if I don't have something that I'm chasing, I tend to do the same. And so let's get back into, I mean, I guess the point I'm trying to make out of this is that you should have a number and you should have a stopgap plan that if something catastrophic happens, that those that are around you don't get caught holding the bag and trying to figure out how to transition it, right? That should be very, very clear.
And one of the big things, yeah, we could talk about selling a business, right? But one of the big things that we work with all the time is generational businesses. Okay, so I've got this 18-year-old kid who seems like he or she would work, but don't know. Have a conversation. What do you think? And it may be way too early because,
Right.
at 18, they have no idea,
Right.
right? And
Right.
even at 25, they might not have any idea, but understand if there's somebody in your family or even your managers who, you want to pass this business on to, as opposed to just selling it outright. But you got to have a plan
Mm.
and you want it to be in the best possible condition when you when you transfer the business, because that's, it's the right thing to do for your kids, but it also maximizes the value if you're selling it to an
Well,
outsider.
yeah. I mean, think about it. I mean, ultimately, I mean, you know this well as I do, Dan, which is when you're growing a business quickly, it's not always pretty and it's not always textbook. And the
It's
fact is
messy.
that
It's
it
very
is
messy.
messy, and you have to realize that. And if you're working a strategic plan and you're like, look, here's my number, you're probably going to know 3 to 5 years out before you get to that number. And there are some fundamental things that you can do to really clean that business up and make it shine. That way, when you go, I mean, listen, I had a guy, and you know him, Dan, because you sold him. I remember he was very strategic before he sold, and he cleaned it up. And I mean, he got top dollar for what he for the size of business that he had. And the reason he got top dollar is because he did this very same thing. He had a number in his brain, and then about 3 years before he sold, he cleaned it all up. And when I say he cleaned it up, like his profit margin was close to 30%. I mean, he was really tight, and you know who I'm talking
Yeah.
about. I mean,
Yeah.
it was something to watch, and I learned a lot watching him do it. So anyway, continue on.
Yeah. So, you know, this is stuff that we've gone over before, but what's the company worth now and in the future? Value is driven by several variables. Among those, and everybody talks about recurring versus non, and we can talk about that and taking on liabilities, but supply and demand, right? In today's market, there's a lot of buyers and sellers. However, as the average age of owners increase and the number of startups whose plan is to build and sell in pretty short order, a lot of younger guys doing that right now. 2 years ago, or a year, maybe 2 years ago and more, there were more buyers than sellers. Now we're seeing that flip. We really are. The valuations, I'm not going to say that they've come down for the highest quality companies, but we used to be able to sling anything at the wall and sell it just a couple of years ago. If I'm perfectly blunt, and now the buyers, they're not interested in that, and the diligence process is much more stringent to flesh out all of the warts and maybe not do the deal. And
Right.
so, what I would say to you is that most likely, if you're an older guy in an older company and things or you've got the company in operationally sound, you're going to do okay. It's these companies that are 1 and 2 and 3 years old that are running so fast, attrition is way high. They have a turnover problem because they're running so hard and whatnot. Those companies are not, you're not going to get very much money for those companies, although a few years ago you could have.
Right.
So,
And rightfully so. I mean, let's
mhm.
be real. I mean, the fact is that their customers are not as sticky, and their long-term plan really doesn't match. I mean, you think about these companies that are kind of the churn and burn. They don't have a long-term plan. Their timeline is 5 years or less, and they're trying to get in and get out. And I think we've said this before, but pest control is not a get rich quick game. It's just not, and it never will be. Even the companies that grow extremely fast, it's because they're putting an extreme amount of investment into the business, right? Whether it be through door-to-door investment or it be, marketing
But
investment. It's
both
not like they
brain,
just blow.
muscle, and money, right?
Right,
So,
exactly. That's my point. And so,
yep.
I mean, for me personally, I mean, if you're a listener to this, I don't think we have a lot of fast burners in our audience, but I could be wrong. If that's what you're thinking, probably not going to work out so well for you, especially if you're looking at what companies were going for. I mean, that I don't want to say that ship has sailed, but that ship has sailed at least for that market. It may come back, but right now, I mean, I agree with you, Dan. I mean, it's good old quality companies. And I say old. I don't really mean like the person has to be old. I'm just they've been around for longer than 5 years, been around longer than 10 years. Those where they've really built it up and they got their services dialed in, they've got their attrition rate dialed in. Those are going to be the ones that they're not going to bend a whole lot to what's happening in the market. I guess is my point.
So let me for a little bit, and I don't really want to get into valuation theory, but just think of it this way. If I gave you $500 a year for 5 years, is that worth more than $500 a year for 2 years or $500 a year for 10 years? And there's a discounting that goes on that you figure out what that value is. So
Hmm.
that's how you look at the business, right? So if the business is only 2 years old, that unknown, how long is that cash flow going? That's a
Hmm.
major valuation factor, right? So the older the company is, the more data that we have about the average life of a customer, because the average life of a customer that's 8 years versus a company that just started 2 years ago and maybe is having some success, that customer is not seasoned and it's not worth as much. So just understand that. The other few things are recurring versus one shot. Everybody knows that. Everybody talks about it. But the one thing that you hear about all the time, and we work with over 400 pest control companies, many of them in excess of 10 million or more. You would be surprised how many of those have 50% or less recurring revenue as a percentage of sales. And I get it, right? So it's very, very, uh, a lot of people become enamored with the profit, and I'm sure that the insulation people shoot me for saying this, but an insulation job that's 5 grand that has a 40% margin is terrific, but not
Hmm.
tomorrow, only
Nope.
today when you do it,
Nope.
right?
Yep.
And so just understand, and that $100 quarterly or $125 quarterly, that's not very sexy compared to that $5,000 insulation
No.
job. So just understand that.
But again, this goes back to having, like, not to quote Stephen Covey and every other person that's ever said it. It's why it's really important that you have this vision of how you're gonna exit and what that number is, and then how are you gonna get there. And I will tell you right now, one shot, insulation, bed bug. I mean, we can throw all the stuff on there. Those are things just to give you cash to close the gap between the months. It certainly doesn't do anything towards building value, and you certainly should be. I mean, for me, I bonus our team based on value because that's what I'm trying to build. Now, obviously, I want profit, and of course, I want to, have a lot of profit, and I want to grow. But ultimately, I'm building an asset, right? Which is why we were having this discussion before we jumped on the podcast here, and I was, belly aching about the growth numbers because, I didn't really build value. And that's the part that, I mean, that's really my goal. And so ultimately, when you have that number in mind, now all of a sudden it gets you very, very clear, and you don't get sidetracked by, oh, look at this nice little shiny object, which every business owner, if you're in business, you're guilty of this. And if you say that you're not, then you're probably delusional, because I haven't met one yet, myself included, that hasn't had that happen from time to time. But it gives you clarity on, this is what I'm building. Here's how I'm going to get there, and here's what I need to do now in order to get there. So, a lot of value in defining that. And
So
defining.
something you just said is interesting. So if you've had the best profit year, you did build some value, right? But it peaks out, right? So let's say you're doing $5 million and you were at 20% profitability, and now you're at 25%
Right.
profitability, and you didn't grow. The value of your company definitely grew, but not a ton. But if you could go
No.
take that from 5 to 10 million and
Mhm.
even do the 20% or the 25, that's where the value comes. So
Right.
you got to do
Exactly.
both, right?
Yep. Yep.
That's the thing. So
Yep.
uh, and just you know, how do you do that? And it's all about retention, 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 and marketing to bring it in, obviously.
Yep.
So
Yep. Yep.
okay.
So let's talk about, like, all right, so I have a number and I have a timeline. Let's talk about a little bit of what's the transition look like. In some cases, it might be like what you said. It might be, hey, I'm going to keep it in the family, and here's what I want this transition to look like. And we have a couple more podcasts behind this, is where we're going to talk to some buyers, not some buyers, some owners who did
Some
exactly
family
just that.
businesses. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. But it also may be that, well, I'm going to sell to a strategic, or I'm going to sell to private equity, or whatever. But you need to be thinking about your buyer as well, because whoever your target buyer is, you need to get your business in line so that it looks very appealing to that buyer. And there's other there's, I mean, and I know that folks know this, but there are other consequences of who you decide to sell to as well. Like, what does your team look like? Do you care, if for example, it goes to, I want to be careful how I say this.
I know exactly what you're going to say. Don't piss anyone off. I have all these
I I
relationships.
will just say this. You really need to think through the big picture. I mean, no matter what, if you've built your business right, you're gonna have more money you could spend anyway. What are the people who helped you build it? What does that look like? And really bringing that into your cross check, because I don't know. I've seen people get short sighted on that and completely, and I'm not going to curse on this podcast, but completely screw their team. And do you really want to do that? And so when you have the timeline to think about that, that absolutely should be a major consideration. Listen, I have a lot of gratitude for my team, and the last thing I would do is turn them over to a bunch of dip, you know what, that don't really know a whole lot, but they gave me a big check, and now I'm gone, and who cares, right? It just those are things you need to think about because they're real, right? I mean, you're still going to see these people at the grocery store. You're still going to, you know, I mean, you still they're still going to be a part of your life, and so um, I don't know. Just things to think about. There's more to it than just the price. And I mean, we're not going to sit here and have a kumbaya moment, but it is absolutely like I've seen it happen several times where someone goes for the short sighted, they get the big check, they get the big promise. The buyer, I'm not going to say who, the buyer doesn't, they put in all these little, what I consider to be snake out clauses. And so in the end, no one really gets anything happy and they end up decimating the team and everything that you built, you just get to sit back and watch it just get torn apart. And that's kind of, I mean, you may not care, you get your big check, who cares? But I don't know. I think I know most business owners, and if there's one thing I know about a lot of business owners is that they're almost loyal to a fault and they're really good people. And so this is something else you really need to think about when you're thinking about your target buyer. So I do a good job of not saying who I was thinking?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, good. You did. So let's talk about a real quick one. And this is because I have a couple clients who have these massive commercial contracts, which are really good. There's also something to be said about, we talked about the one time, but this is called concentration risk, customer concentration risk. If 50% of your business is one customer, that's a problem. Is it saleable? It is, but it's not worth as much. And it will definitely be they'll put a fence around it and figure out some sort of indemnity clause to protect them so that if they lose that customer, that they can, recoup their money. The other thing is that a lot of people don't want to deal with that because that guy that customer is such a big customer and is usually a pain in the you know what, right? And you have to jump as high as they say and do whatever they say because, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose half my business. So just understand that customer concentration risk is not something that you want to build. That's not to say if you get $1 million contract, don't take it, but just understand what you're doing. But then, let's talk about the family dynamic. If a child's interested in taking over, that's not as easy as, if you've got a buyer and the negotiation becomes contentious, you can just, lop it off and say, you know what, I'm going to go work with somebody else. If you have a son or daughter and it becomes contentious, how do you deal with that?
And listen, I've seen this, and I've seen it get ugly, and I've seen it go well, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but there is one major thing that you have to be very careful, at least that I have observed, and you don't have to agree with me, but I've seen a lot of second and third generation owners really be hemmed up because one, they were never put in a hard spot as they were being groomed. And I'm not faulting the parents or anything like that. This is not a show about that. It's just they didn't really put them through what I would consider to be the gauntlet and properly prepare them. But there's also immense pressure because on the new owner, on the second generation, because now they're taking care of mom and dad and they're scared shitless to make a decision because if they do, they risk screwing them and they've never really done that. And so what happens is that, they're just really slow. They're very risk adverse. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm just these are things to think about. Right.
But also make sure that you're not taking so much of the cake that it's not worthwhile for the kid. Cause you're absolutely right. Sometimes, oh, geez, how's that going to affect mom and dad? And I'm not making much money. Mom and dad are making it, and they're going to be making it for the next 15 years unless I, so understand that that's going on,
It's something. Now, having said that, I've seen some families who've done this very well. And they've thought it through, and the second and third generation is not they're not risk averse, and in fact they take the business to the next level, and everyone's working, and you know what I mean, and it's and mom and dad are happy, and the second and third generation owner is happy, and so all I'm saying is it's like most things, right? Don't wait until there's some sort of, and we kind of, ending where we started, which is don't wait for some emergency to figure this out. Don't be forced to do this because you didn't plan. Ultimately have that number and know how you're going to do it. So,
Yeah.
all right, Dan,
I
finish
would
this
tell
out.
you that, yeah, so there's a couple of things that we're not going to get to, but um, this may sound self-serving, but it doesn't, it's not. It's make sure that you have the right team. So obviously a good accountant, a good lawyer. We talked about the estate planning and what we're going to do. A good exit planning person who you can trust. We do that kind of work. Maybe it is a little self-serving, but just understand that you need a good team and a good investment advisor, right? So those are the team members that you need. And remember, a lot of people build businesses because they're scrappy and they can, weather anything and run through the wall. But if you've never done this before, rely on people who have done it and the professionals, as opposed to saying, I've done everything myself and I'm going to continue to do everything myself. Because one of the biggest issues is not doing anything because you think that you have it under control, like my client who,
Mm,
dropped dead 2 weeks ago.
mm.
So that's what I would
Yeah.
leave you with if that's not too depressing. So
Well, the only thing I'll add to this is that, and we'll close it out here, which is, again, if you've not done any kind of planning, and I'm not talking about estate planning here. This is not, I mean, obviously this is a big part of most of our listeners' estates. It certainly is my biggest part of my estate, which is, a simple document that has clear direction of what should happen in the short term. And then, the long-term plan, that's something that you can work on. But ultimately, if there's one big takeaway, that if you don't have something in place for your family, do everyone a favor and get it down on paper. This is not difficult to do. It's probably a little depressing, but the fact is that we're all going there, right? And so exit on your terms. Don't
Yep.
exit on someone else's terms or by emergency if you can help
Yeah.
it. And I mean, that's all controllable. So,
Yeah. So just so that you know that this is kind of the preamble to the next few episodes where we're going to have some uh, family businesses on and talk about some of the dynamics and some of the other things. So looking forward to that.
yeah, yeah. All righty. Just a reminder that all the resources and topics that we talked about today are available on the podcast website. Just take a look at pmpindustryinsider.com. You can just look under show notes and we'll have it up there. Also, just a quick addition here, which Dan requested me to say, which is if you have an idea or a topic that you'd like for us to cover, we'd be more than happy to do it. However, we ask that you contact Dan with that, especially if you have complaining or general complaints. We love it when you contact him, and he does as well. It's his favorite thing to do. And with that, we're signing off. We'll see you all next time. Take care now.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.